Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Chargers Podcast Network. My name is Steven, and I'm the host as always. And joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How are you doing today?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It was a great holiday, obviously, with New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Watched some great football games yesterday. The Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl were fantastic. So hope everybody else had a good New Year's weekend as well. We're going to have a bit of a New Year's Day themed show today. We're going to have some New Year's resolution Chargers edition. And then we also have received some questions from you guys, our listeners, and we'll address those today. So it should be a fun one. A lot of stuff to dive into, a lot of different questions, draft questions, coaches questions, regular season, off-season questions. You guys brought it today, and I'm really excited to dive into some of these. That being said, Tyler and I are fans of the team, just like you guys are. We are not employees of the Chargers. This show is dedicated to our opinions and ours alone. They do not reflect the opinions of the Chargers organization. We're very grateful for this platform and happy to be covering our last game. This is week 18. I can't believe the end of the season is here. It's been obviously an up and down season for the team, but it's been a blast covering the team on the channel with you guys, and we appreciate all the great support from the Chargers, as well as you guys, the listeners, in the comments and on social media and all that good stuff. And it's just kind of a surreal feeling that the season is a few days away from wrapping up.
Yeah, it feels like just yesterday we were drafting Bijan Robinson at 21. Did not happen. He went a little bit earlier than that, and everything else is different. Yeah, been an up and down season for sure, but it's still been fun regardless.
Yeah, always fun to cover the Chargers. Always fun to talk about stuff, watch film. You know, we're football junkies for a reason. And excited to dive in stuff today. So like I mentioned, we're going to do a bit of a New Year's resolution theme for this episode. We're going to feature some stuff from the season, stuff from, this upcoming week against the Kansas City Chiefs, future resolutions as well. It is that time of the year. So we tried to make the content a little bit more fun today. So Tyler, what is your biggest 2024 New Year's resolution for the Chargers?
The Chargers need to start winning the games that they need to win in the fourth quarter and get away from the quote-unquote chargering that has plagued them for, you could say, years, you could say decades, you could say the entire franchise's history as a team that has not won the Super Bowl. You look at the last 3 years under Brandon Staley, and the Chargers have 12 games where they lost, where they had a lead or were tied in the fourth quarter or lost in overtime. And that frankly just isn't good enough. And I don't know exactly where the Chargers pull from to get over the hump and win those games, but it could be from themselves, from better drafting, better signings, or another head coach and a new head coach that brings something different that allows them to flip the script in several of those moments. So Chargers need to be better there. There are many things individually that I'd love the Chargers to improve at, of course, but overall, they got to win. And in particular, these games where they're very, very close, but close doesn't count. You got to win.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start this conversation. Just being able to have that closer's mentality. We saw glimpses of it under the Brandon Staley era. Obviously, I think the best case there is that game in Kansas City in 2021 where, that aggressive closer mentality was the staple leading into the week. It just needs to carry out throughout the whole season. Like obviously I watch a lot of Pac-12 football. It's really the only college football that I am consuming throughout the whole year consistently. And this Washington football team that's going to play for the national championship next week is just incredibly impressive. They have 10 straight wins of 1 touchdown or less. Like, it doesn't matter who the opponent is, what kind of style the other team brings to the table. Like, they just have a way of making plays in key situations, in clutch moments, whether it's last night in the Sugar Bowl, whether it's, in a rainstorm against ASU. Like, there's just a mentality that permeates from the coaching staff to the players that allows them to make these plays in clutch moments. And that's not something that has been around this team. And I'm hopeful that changes with the new regime. And we can see guys, obviously, like Justin Herbert, more moments like that Raiders game where he was able to, come back from the finger injury and put his stamp on that game, or whether it was a Derwin James interception against Darren Waller, or whatever the case may be. Like, we just, these players deserve to have more moments like that. For some reason, all of the closing moments that I am picturing in my head right now are games against the Raiders and Chiefs. Specifically like one game against the Chiefs, but it's a lot of Raiders games. So just whatever happens in those games, just bring it to the rest of the table.
Yeah, totally get it. And listen, that contributes to the division, right? You're thinking of these games because they're the division games, and you got to win those to win the division. And the Chargers have struggled there, of course. And of course, you and I were in person in that Week 18 game against the Raiders, so I understand why you're pulling from that one. So yeah, got to be better there for sure.
I think my resolution for 2024 is to have the Chargers find a consistent run game. I think there's been far too much pressure on Justin Herbert to carry the offense over the last 3 years for a variety of reasons, really 4 years if you want to go back that far. This is a team that has not been able to find that consistent run game. We saw glimpses of it again in 2021, glimpses of it last year. We saw 240 yards in week 1 this year, but it's being able to find that consistency. And this is not a singling out of any one person. This is, a collective effort. And Kell Moore has preached that from the beginning. It's all 11 guys. Like I watch a team like the Detroit Lions and their wide receivers block their tails off every single week. And obviously they have a great offensive line and some very good backs, but it doesn't matter if everybody is not doing their jobs. And I think that is, again, a change that I think needs to come to fruition. This season has, that was something that was promised from Kell Moore and Doug Nussmeier coming over. And, the changes that were made were not sufficient, obviously. But how many of these games over the last 3 years do the Chargers win if they have that consistent run game? And it's just been moments, and finding that consistency for me is really a key thing in how I am looking at like these head coaching candidates, how I'm looking at the GMs, how I'm looking at what they're doing with Kell Moore now that, he's kind of taken on a larger role of the offense. How am I looking at these players over the last few weeks and their potential roles for next year going forward on our new coaching staff? So we know that Justin Herbert is going to be a great quarterback regardless of who is coaching him. It's about how do you support that quarterback, and the run game for me has been severely lacking over the last 3 years, and I would like to see that changed in 2024.
Yeah, and by extension of that, my other resolution, just because we're on the same track here, the Chargers need to find alignment, and we've discussed this several times, between the general manager and who they pick and the offensive coordinator and how he wants to use those players, particularly from the jump. Now, not every player has to be Puka Nacua and breaking records and 1,500 yards in his rookie season. I don't expect that, but the Chargers it's been so difficult for them. And if you want to talk about the run game, the running backs and the tight ends in particular, it's been difficult for these guys to get going from the jump. And if you look at their last 9 skill position players on offense that they've drafted, which is Joshua Kelly, Joe Reed, KJ Hill, Josh Palmer, Trey McKitty, Larry Roundtree, Isaiah Spiller, Xander Horvath, and Quentin Johnston, those players in year 1 have a combined 1,581 yards in their rookie seasons of those 9 players, which averages about 176 total yards average for each of those players in their year 1s, which is about 10.3 yards, total yards per game. These guys are not getting going from the jump. And again, not everybody has to be Puka Nacua, but these guys need to be a lot better. And I think that you have to align yourselves more, because I think the GM, I think Tom Telesco has picked good players. I think that there are coordinators who can make it work with the players that they have. These guys come together and it doesn't amount to as much as we'd hope. The Chargers have really struggled to get some of these guys going. And that's why I think, partially why they can't close out these games and why the run game isn't going, because they take players that I think when we all look at the draft, we go, okay, yep, I see that. That's a good player. That could work. Yeah. There's some development there. And then they get onto the field. And again, these players, those 9 players average 10.3 yards per game total. And that's just not good enough. So they got to be better in that regard as well.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the draft, like there's a certain philosophy in evaluating players and how things get done from a front office standpoint. But at the end of the day, once the selections are made, it's on the coaching staff to figure out ways to develop these players and figure their specific roles out and allow them to become their best selves. And I don't like it's an alignment thing, but it's also an execution thing. And it's, having the right preparation for the draft. It's having the right preparation for the plan and being able to have the coaches who can execute that plan on a week to week basis, on a year to year basis. And, development is not linear. Obviously, these players who are still on the roster can still figure things out. Like we've seen, players across the league be able to, have some struggles in the year one, and then they figure it out in year two. And that's certainly not impossible for these young guys who are maybe struggling right now. But at the end of the day, like, they're on the team. It's on the coaches at this point to figure out how to use them properly, or find guys who can execute that role in a better fashion.
Yeah, I agree. Another resolution from you, Steven.
Yeah, I'm gonna highlight specifically this last week against the Kansas City Chiefs as the team closes out the 2023 season. This past week, we saw what I think was a very solid to above average performance from Mr. Jordan McFadden, getting his first career start at left guard. So my resolution for this week is to get more positive momentum from the last two draft classes against the Chiefs on Sunday. Whether that's a big Quentin Johnston game, whether that's been a big Tuli Tuipulotu game, whether that's an Isaiah Spiller touchdown or something of that matter. Somebody besides Jordan McFadden, I would like to see some real positive momentum to close out the season, and be able to show whoever the incoming coaching staff and GM are this kind of game tape, and be able to have that evaluation. To a lesser extent, we saw a little bit of Deion Henley on Sunday against the Broncos. He, according to Gift Smith, was dealing with a groin injury. But when he was on the field, there were some real positive moments. He was a key piece in defending that quarterback sneak from Russell Wilson that led to that stop. He had another key tackle against, I think it was little Jordan Humphrey, later on in that same drive. So maybe Deion is somebody who can come in here. But the resolution here is more positive momentum from the young players heading into 2024.
I agree. Anybody listening, go make a Google sheet or Excel spreadsheet and just start making up the projected roster for next season. How many blank spaces are there? How many question marks are there on that roster? Trying to place these guys as, are they starters? Are they even like the second, the backup for the team? It's very difficult to do that right now. And I don't know that one game is going to change that. But like you said, I'd love for the momentum to carry into next season. So you really start to see, okay, like maybe we feel better about this particular player. Maybe we don't have to reach for this other player in the draft, or we don't have to, take this position so early or spend this much money or whatever it is. Answering those questions would be great. Another player that I'd love to have momentum carry into in this game and carrying into next season is Derwin James, who I think had a very, very good game against the Broncos recently. And I know that like we're not big for Pro Football Focus grades necessarily. We like, different stats. We like our eyes and what we see. But Derwin James, that was his best PFF game grade since November of 2021, and a top 5 game grade for him in his entire career. Mm-hmm. That is what we need to see against the Chiefs, if possible. We need to see that kind of Derwin James, because while we don't love using grades, that grade kind of fit what we saw. It just felt like we were seeing Derwin James again. It felt like we saw the best version of him and what he was able to do. Thankfully not flagged, but he was flying around, rushing the passer, hitting very hard, being very physical and aggressive. That's the kind of stuff we were used to seeing with him. That's why we all fell in love with him in 2018 when he instantly took the league by storm. And so if we can start getting back to that, and if Derwin James can continue that momentum into next season, you're feeling a lot better, because I do think Derwin James sticks around. I do think he's still a very, very important piece of this defense moving forward. Being a really, really great player again would be fantastic for this defense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who has been, arguably the face of the franchise. Justin Herbert is obviously the franchise quarterback, but he's not super public all the time. Derwin has been that guy a lot for this team, and this is a guy who means so much to this locker room, who has consistently been, one of the game captains, consistently has been the tone setter. Me and you were in training camp, and there was, a bit of a defensive struggle there for a little bit, and Derwin James was the one to rally the guys, and Asante made a play, and then Morgan Fox made a play, and everybody rallied around Derwin James. He's been one of the best safeties in the league. He's been a Pro Bowl player. He's been an All-Pro player. I still believe that player is in there. I still believe that guy can be brought out for an entire season in different circumstances. I do truly believe that. And I think we saw glimpses of that on Sunday against the Broncos. I would love to see that continue. Maybe he gets that interception that he missed this past week. Maybe he gets that on Sunday. I still think that he can be a game-changing presence, and we're seeing the value of a player like him in the Ravens with Kyle Hamilton. And Derwin James is a significantly better athlete, like objectively, numbers wise, is a much better athlete than Kyle Hamilton was. So there's still a place in the NFL for Derwin James. I think people are being a little too harsh, probably far too harsh on Derwin James this season. And I still think that with the right defensive coordinator or head coach who calls plays on defense, can get Derwin back to the player that we're used to seeing, because I think we've seen glimpses of him this season. It's just, I think there's been too much on his plate. I think that the penalties, maybe there's an injury, I don't know. But I still believe in Derwin James. I think that he has a big 2024 in store for this Chargers team.
Yeah, I would agree. Derwin James is too good, I think, to have, I don't want to say the same kind of season, because that means it sounds like it was a really terrible season. It was not. It just wasn't the Derwin James season. It wasn't, what we've become accustomed to. But they're going to have to lean on him quite a bit next season, because as it currently stands, they're going to need at least another outside corner, a slot corner, one of the other safeties, potentially another depth corner, another depth safety. Like, they're going to have to rely on Derwin James so much, because he is that guy. He is that veteran. He is the high-paid guy. He is the star on defense. They might not ask him to do as much, but they're still going to rely on him to be out there and be that presence. And hopefully he can kind of have the same kind of season that Khalil Mack is having, where he just is that guy out there and driving this defense forward.
Yeah, 100%. My last one here, this is kind of a resolution, but also kind of a wish, I guess. And that's a healthy season for Rashawn Slater in 2024, because a healthy Rashawn Slater is arguably the best left tackle in the sport. And I think we've seen him be significantly healthier over the last 6 weeks of the season specifically. Duke Manyweather said online a few weeks ago that he was dealing with a double high ankle sprain, which sounds incredibly painful to me. I can't imagine playing a football game consistently every single week on a high ankle sprain, let alone a double high ankle sprain, whatever that means. I'm not a medical expert. That being said, I can see with my eyes quality offensive line play. I can look at the numbers and see quality offensive line play. And that's what Rashawn Slater has been giving this team. You look at his first 3 weeks of the season, he was consistently, again, being graded objectively, depending on how you feel about PFF. He was consistently being graded in the high 80s, which is elite grades for an offensive tackle. He allowed 3 pressures total in the first 3 weeks. And then that's kind of when the injury happened, after the Minnesota Vikings game. And we saw some off play there. There was an 8 pressure game against the Jets. There was 6 against the Dallas Cowboys. But over the last few weeks, going back to the Patriots game, you're looking at 1 pressure allowed there, 1 pressure allowed against in the first Broncos game, 2 against the Raiders, 0 against the Bills, and 1 this past week against the Denver Broncos. And the grades and the pressure numbers, the film is all lining up to the player that we know that Rashawn Slater can be. This is a guy who was a second team All-Pro as a rookie after not playing in 2020, his final year at Northwestern. This is a guy who is arguably one of the highest ceiling left tackles in the league. And I want to see that guy fully healthy again, man, because when he's been out there for the Chargers, it's just been incredibly high-end tackle play. And, the team obviously missed that really severely last year, as well as when he was dealing with the high ankle sprain this year. So, again, kind of a resolution, kind of a hope, but Rashawn Slater, I hope, has a healthy 2024.
That would be amazing, man. Rashawn Slater is fantastic. Double high ankle sprain. So I believe I talked to Jameson, and he said that was just 1 in each leg. So not
Okay.
like a double on 1 leg, but like 2 legs, high ankle sprain. Awful thing to be playing with. Yeah. In addition to the back, the neck, recovering sort of from the bicep from the previous year. So much stuff to have to go through, and to be able to play through all that is incredible. I can't do a single thing against Micah Parsons if my life depended on it. I can't imagine with a double high ankle sprain and multiple injuries. Granted, I'm not exactly as talented as Rashawn Slater either. I hope he's healthy because he is fantastic. And you and I had the argument that he was, in terms of where he ranked relative to his peers, the best player on the team, not the MVP. Right, that is Justin Herbert until it's no longer Justin Herbert. But in terms of who is the best at their position, okay, well, maybe now it's Cameron Dicker, but Rashawn Slater is certainly one of those guys. I want Rashawn Slater to do well because it is just different when he is healthy, when he is excellent, because he is excellent.
Yeah, there are people out there like talking about the offseason decisions for the Chargers and like, oh, they have a hard decision on Rashawn Slater. No, they don't. Extend him. Give him a blank check.
Yeah,
I'm
cool
cool
with cut
it.
you off. Do not talk about right tackle movement for Rashawn Slater. You have an all-pro left tackle. Leave him there. It's working great.
Yeah. Big fans of Rashawn Slater over here. Hopefully he can stay healthy next year and prove everybody right. So, Tyler, any other resolutions you want to get to before we get to some of these questions?
Just health for the whole team then. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's perfectly healthy. Let's do that.
Yeah, I think you can make the same thing I just said about Rashawn, about Justin Herbert. No more rib injuries, no more finger injuries.
Yes.
Healthy 2024, please.
I agree.
All right, we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll come back to dive into some of these questions. Hey guys, VIP ticket packages for the first ever Super Bowl in Las Vegas are now on sale. And only On Location offers all-inclusive experiences worthy of the entertainment capital of the world. Ticket packages boast an array of offerings such as premium seating to the game, epic pregame parties with headline talent, NFL legend appearances, premium drinks and fare, and much more. Visit NFLOnLocation.com or search NFL On Location today. Your football experience of a lifetime awaits only with On Location. All right, Tyler. Again, some of these questions are fantastic. Really excited to jump into them. Appreciate everybody who sent these questions. We're obviously not able to get to all of them that you guys sent in. We'll do our best to make sure we provide an answer on social media, but we'll get to some of them as possible. There's a lot of draft questions in here. Obviously, understandable that the fan base has kind of pivoted to that area right now. Me and you have started watching prospects, and it's been a lot of fun to dive into. So first question here from Jay Webbin OC. He said, based on the current projected draft order, how many quarterbacks are taken in front of the Chargers at 6? Again, that could certainly change. And then based on that answer, who do you think the Chargers could take in the draft? So for those who are kind of not paying attention, I think it's safe to say at least 2. Caleb Williams and Drake May are really solidified. They're potentially 1 and 2 overall. Tyler, do you think there's a chance that maybe one of these other quarterbacks could sneak into the draft ahead of the Chargers at 6?
Yeah, definitely. So whoever trades up with the Bears at 1, that's going to be whoever that quarterback is. And maybe it's someone already ahead of the Chargers. Let's say it's New England.
Or the Bears at 1.
What's that?
Or the Bears stay at 1.
Or I don't. I think they're set with Justin Fields. I think, unless they want to take Marvin Harrison Jr. first overall, which I guess I would get. Regardless, I think someone ends up trading up. I think they trade out. 2 quarterbacks for sure, and I think it ends up being 3, because you have Washington, New England, the Giants, and then you potentially could have another team jump in front of those other teams or try to move up to take a quarterback. So I think 3 quarterbacks go ahead of the Chargers. Whether they are graded as being players that should go top 5, that's not always necessarily the case. It's the quarterback thing. You could have a second round. Well, hopefully, if you trade up, you don't have a second round grade on this quarterback. But some of these quarterbacks may not be great, but you got to trade up for one because it's quarterback. So I think 3 go. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously goes before the Chargers, probably to Arizona. If they're sticking with Kyler Murray, which it seems like, then that's if the Cardinals are in front of the Chargers, they're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. And like you said, I guess the Bears could stay put and take him as well. So unfortunately, that's not happening. I really do think it comes down to the 2 skill position players in Brock Bowers and Malik Neighbors. As long as those guys, are healthy, everything checks out, they interview well, the combine's all good, those guys should be top 7-ish picks in this draft. They are the blue chip, bona fide, great players that you can take. Nothing is a sure bet, but if you're going to bet on anybody, those 2 players are ones to bet on. And I do think, until proven otherwise, I really do think Brock Bowers is the pick. And I could tell you that now on January 2nd, and as long as things don't change in terms of draft order, that's probably their pick in a few months because they desperately need a tight end. They don't have one really going into next season. And he's a great gosh darn player. And when there's a great gosh darn player in front of you, you take him. Some guys are just different. Brock Bowers is like, I don't know where he's going to grade out for you, but he's like a Penei Sewell. Some prospects are just really, really great. And I know there's some position value worry there. So sure, it's not a tackle like Penei Sewell, but there's Brock Bowers and then everybody else. And I think it's going to be him. The Chargers desperately need another tight end. So it's the easy answer. It's the safe answer, but I also think it's the right one.
Yeah, I love Brock Bowers. I love Malik Neighbors. Both of those guys are fantastic prospects. Quickly on the quarterback thing, I do agree that it'll be 3. There's a lot of momentum around Jaden Daniels being a potential top 5 draft pick. Again, maybe that doesn't equate to him being, the 5th highest graded prospect across the board, but we've seen this year like how hard it is to find a quarterback. Like these teams are gonna, there's always quarterback overdraft if the class is good enough, and this quarterback class is good enough in my opinion. After last night, there's a lot of Michael Penix talk. There's definitely some questionable medical history there. He's also going to be 24 at the start of next season. Before the Chargers, I think on Penix is a little bit much for me, based on those two things. But Jaden Daniels, I think his ability as a runner, his growth as a passer, he's also older, but I think his ceiling is continuing to point up. I think Penix, you're a little bit worried about how far his ceiling can get because of the injury history. So I think Jaden Daniels is in play in the top 6. Maybe that equates to the Chargers potentially trading down and somebody, taking Jaden Daniels there. That would be fantastic. So I think ultimately it'll be 3 quarterbacks. It'll be Marvin Harrison Jr. for sure off the board before the Chargers pick. So that puts the Chargers in a great spot. Maybe again, you can take, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors. It'd be a great selection. Maybe you convince one of these teams to trade up for one of the offensive tackles. I know that there's a lot of people who want the Chargers to take an offensive tackle. I happen to really like Olu Fashanu and J.C. Latham from Penn State and Alabama, respectively. So I think the Chargers are in a great spot. My thinking into the draft, though, is that you take the highest end player at their position and you figure everything else out. That, to me, is Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is, to me, the best prospect in this class, and outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. So if Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the board, you take him. If not, it's Brock Bowers all day, every day for me. And I know that there's position concerns, but if we could go back and redo the draft class, how high is Sam Laporta going? How high is Dalton Kincaid going? And nobody's going to pivot to, well, draft value equates that they're second round picks. It's the production, it's the prospect. And I think, there's justification for Brock Bowers going that high. I think he's the best prospect, not named Marvin Harrison Jr. in this 2024 draft class.
Yeah, I agree. Go take the players that make the rest of college football look like children. Go take them. Those are good players sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, this is a good question as well from Silvestre. If the draft were today, what's bigger, the need on defense or the need on offense? This is kind of taking out where the Chargers are picking here. What do the Chargers need more of? Where do they need more help at? What's your answer there, Tyler?
So this surprised me because I thought I was going one direction. I believe that their number one need in terms of which specific position is the most empty right now is corner, or I guess defensive back. That's not even really a question to me. But I actually think overall, if you have 7 picks, I think the offense actually needs more help. I think there's more issues in terms of holes on the roster on offense than there are on defense. And I think that Corey Linsley, that situation did not help them in going from all pro to we are not even sure right now. At this current point in time, I'm not sure. That changes a bit. The running backs, you go 1, 2, 3, 4 technically, and they all are either gone next year or haven't worked out so far. That changes quite a bit. So you might need a tight end 1, a tight end 2, or RB1, an RB2, a center, a swing tackle, potentially another receiver. I mean, there's a lot for the Chargers to have to fill here all of a sudden. And so while I think that corner is the most obvious need for the Chargers, I don't think it necessarily means that defense overall needs the most help in the draft.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we're projecting obviously a lot of roster turnover with these free agency moves, and there's going to be some decisions that have to be made. I think that you can make a real argument that pass rush in general could be the biggest need that the Chargers have. Um, Thule obviously is going to be on the roster. I think Morgan Fox is going to be on the roster. He's still under contract, and there's really no point in moving off of him because that doesn't benefit them. Um, I think Khalil Mack or Joey Bosa, one of them will still be on the roster. But at the end of the day, like, this is a league that is really morphing into, like, you need 4 high-end pass rushers, or at least 3 and one other guy who can contribute at a high level, at an efficient level. And when the Chargers had Joey Bosa healthy, Khalil Thule, and Morgan Fox, that was their best pass rush performances. Obviously, Joey gets injured, and then things change. And Thule has kind of slowed down a bit recently. He's still impacting the run at a very high level, but as a pass rusher, it's been a bit tougher for him over the last few weeks. So, due to the uncertainty there, I would almost lean towards pass rusher being that much of a draft need. This is not necessarily, it doesn't sound like a great cornerback class, but there's a great pass rushing defensive tackle in this class, Johnny Newton from Illinois. There's Liatu Latu for the edge rusher from UCLA. There's Jared Verse from Florida State. Like, if you're talking about pure draft need, I think cornerback is the biggest position need, but based off of where they're potentially taking in the draft, I think you could make a real argument that it's pass rush.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely think that defensive tackle is a position the Chargers fans aren't really talking about as much. That needs to be addressed. And I think when you move on from Sebastian Joseph Day, that really heightens the need for another defensive tackle in this class. So all the more reason to trade back, because that second round range, especially I feel like the last couple of years, has yielded some really strong defensive tackles in the draft. And I think the Chargers need to take advantage of that, but you also need a center. You also need a corner. So yeah, trading back would be good. And defensive tackle, I think, is something they definitely need to look into. They could do it in round 1. Newton is awesome, and I totally get it. But round 2, round 3, definitely got to go find somebody else there too.
Yeah, there's some great defensive tackle play on display yesterday for Michigan and Texas, especially if you watch those 2 games. All right, we had some similar questions there about those topics from Kurt as well as Swipa and Bartholomew W. So we'll we appreciate you guys' questions, but hopefully we answered them in some aspect there. Let's get to some coaching questions here, Tyler. Bill Bohart asking, I'm not sure if you have already covered this and I missed the podcast episode, but hypothetically, let's say Jim Harbaugh stays at Michigan. Do you then pick a GM first and allow him to control the hiring process? So there's a lot of questions out there like this. I just wanted to use Bill's question specifically to talk about this. The Chargers have said that they're going to do both at the same time, and then whoever is kind of like the best candidate, like they'll let that person pick the one or the other, basically. But Tyler, if Jim Harbaugh stays at Michigan, what are your thoughts here about pivoting first to the GM?
I believe that, especially in terms of the demand, there's only one GM candidate you absolutely have to go do first, and that is Adam Peters. And if that is your number one, and I think it seems like unanimously around people who, the media personalities and people who discuss this, and even among fans, Adam Peters is the number one candidate out there. I think that's the guy you got to go get first. If you do not get him, then I do not believe it really matters which order you go. I think Adam Peters is the only person you go out and you go get first and figure out the rest later, if Jim Harbaugh does not go to the Chargers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Adam Peters, the assistant general manager for the San Francisco 49ers, for those who don't know, he's consistently the number one option from a GM standpoint. Ben Standig from The Athletic had a great article covering the Commander side of things, but a lot of great information about the candidates overall. And Adam Peters had like this huge blurb of like 6 or 7 paragraphs, and every other one was like 1 or 2. There was another survey from The Athletic back in September, and Adam Peters was the only assistant general manager to get mentioned by agents that were surveyed. to be one of the top talent evaluators. Everybody else was actual like GM candidates. So Adam Peters has a lot of fans around the league, a lot of pull around the league. So I do tend to agree. Like if your pecking order, so to speak, is, Harbaugh's the top candidate for the head coaching side, he's off the board. If you want to pivot to Adam Peters at that point, I'm okay with that. But like Tyler said, I feel great about like 8 candidates from a GM side of things. I think there are such a quality pool to pull from, from the personnel side of things. And there's not as many openings. I think we're going to see 3, maybe 4 GM openings. There could be 6, 7, 8 head coaching openings. So, and there's not 8 head coaching candidates, I think, right now. So I think there's a much deeper pool at GM where you could be a little bit more patient there. And then, of course, if you do hire a coach who's tied to a certain GM candidate, maybe you want to go that route. So I think I agree. I'm cool being a little bit more patient on the GM front.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up, actually, because we've discussed that especially on offense, there's not a huge pool of head coaches to pull from. There's really nobody out there as far as we can tell. We haven't seen what happens at the end of the year when some other teams make some pretty significant changes at head coach. So
yeah,
that could change things. But for right now, yeah, there isn't a ton out there. So I guess, yeah, I could see head coach being solidified if you want. I think Ben Johnson seems to be the hottest name in terms of offensive-minded, I guess not counting Harbaugh, offensive side of the football. So maybe you have to go get him first. But no, I think that Adam Peters is the only one you really have to go out and actually get 100% first, because everybody's going to want him.
Yeah, a certain owner in Carolina very much wants to hire Ben Johnson. So that's been very well documented. He was delivered a very large fine today. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch over there. All right, next question here. Sticking in the coach realm here, Ryan Kenzinger, do you guys think there's any possibility Kell Moore is back as the play caller next season? And would you be happy with that? What do you think there, Tyler?
Yeah, I think there's a chance he's back next year. I think that Justin Herbert does very much so like him. And I think I would understand the Chargers looking at what happened the first few weeks of the season and going, like, that was the plan. This could have been something.
Yeah.
This could have been the team that threw for 450 yards, had 4 touchdowns against the Vikings, and Justin Herbert, up until that point, the best game of his career, in my opinion. The team that dropped 34 on the Dolphins. I think that the Chargers could look at that and go, we need to go with that. And they're probably looking at what Shane Steichen is doing, going, man, what if we had one more year? Now, we don't know. Shane Steichen in Philly, I think, grows more than Shane Steichen if the Chargers kept
100%.
everything the same. So it's not a perfect match there, but I think you look at what he's doing and go, maybe one more year. So if the Chargers believe that Kell Moore can bring them what they did the first 3 weeks, and Justin Herbert really likes him, which I believe he does. And by the way, like, Justin Herbert was improving. I think it was his best season until it wasn't, with all the certain injuries and whatnot. But what he was able to do at the line of scrimmage, what he did against the Lions, we have not seen that. What he did against the Packers, one of his best games, him calling things at the line of scrimmage, making audibles, that's very different. So in terms of Keenan Allen, of course, and then Justin Herbert, I think Kellen Moore could stick around because he made those players really, really good. Made them good sounds mean. Sounds like the other guy shouldn't get enough credit. They all worked really well together, and so I could understand them keeping him around. So I would totally understand why.
Yeah, I think the vision of the offense feels incomplete because of all the injuries, but when it was complete, it was a ton of fun to watch. It was an objectively top 3 unit in points, EPA per play, success rate, all that stuff. And like you mentioned, it really felt like Justin was taking that next step, and then all the injuries kind of derailed the season. So I think from an ownership standpoint, they came out and said, Justin Herbert is our number 1 priority and like supporting him. Well, if he feels like Kellen Moore is his best chance at staying supported, there's absolutely a chance that Kellen Moore can stick around. And there are definitely some things that I think I would like to see changed if Kellen Moore does stick around from like schematic standpoint, as well as personnel usage and things like that. But it's really tough for me to say, what the future of Kellen's status is without knowing who the head coach is, because if you hire somebody who's an offensive coach, maybe their offensive philosophies clash. If you hire a defensive coach, maybe that makes Kellen's job a little bit safer. You look at what the Miami Dolphins did when they hired Mike McDaniel. They still kept the same defensive coordinator because it was kind of viewed as like, well, Mike can fix the offense. Somebody that's been in the building can stay with the defense and kind of keep things running. And I think that could be a possibility in for the Chargers, depending on who they hire as the head coach. Kellen Moore still has a lot of fans around the league. It was reported a few weeks ago that the Panthers would still be interested in interviewing him for their opening. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, if Justin Herbert wants Kellen Moore to stick around, I think that has significant pull this time around.
Yeah, I would agree. I wish we got 8 games of Kellen Moore in that offense because we'd feel a lot differently. We'd see what it looked like for half of a season, and then injuries pile up, of course. But yeah, I wish we got more time with that offense to really see what they could bring for more than just 3.
Yeah, I agree there. All right, next question here, kind of shifting gears a little bit. Ride or Die Chargers asked, how do the Chargers go about upgrading their secondary? How deep is this year's free agency and draft classes for corners specifically is his second question there. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, so it seems like to me, especially after I haven't watched the Iowa corner, but watching 3 of the 4 top corners in this class, it feels, I don't mean this as a knock, but it feels like last year's wide receiver class, where the depth is probably going to be very strong, and there's some good guys you can get end of round 1 into round 2, etc. But maybe you don't have to take one super early. Maybe you could wait, and there's no real like number 1 guy. There's no Gonzalez, there's no Witherspoon, there's no Joey Porter Jr. Not that those guys, like McKinstry and Wiggins can't be, really good corners and aren't really good prospects. They are. I just think that those guys were like top 7 players in their class. I think for me, they were top 6 on my draft board. Yeah. Not that anybody cares. But for what it's worth, I really did like those guys. I think this corner class, I didn't watch McKinstry specifically yesterday, so maybe that changes. But I think you can wait a bit. The Chargers need to go get some veteran presence, some sort of stopgap in free agency that it's tough to find a good veteran that's also cheap in free agency because those guys are going to be more expensive. But got to find some veteran presence out there, I think, in free agency to start opposite Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah, I think if you're expanding this to secondary, I think the one place I would start is bringing back Alohi Gilman and maintaining some continuity at the safety position. Jalen Hawkins has looked pretty good, as the safety 3. So I think that's something you can continue to invest resources in. Obviously, you're not handing jobs out by any means, but you can probably solve the safety position a little bit easier if you keep Alohi around. And then you can really devote more resources to the cornerback position. Like Tyler said, I do kind of agree that this is probably a deeper class more than a high-end cornerback class. I was a big fan of Nate Wiggins of Clemson relative to this class, but I don't think he's, in that same kind of range as the guys that Tyler mentioned, as a guy like Sauce Gardner or JC Horn. But he's a good player. He's a first-round corner. If you trade down to 12 and you take Nate Wiggins, I think that's fine. I think that's a fine selection there. But at 6, at 7, I think that's probably a little bit too early for the cornerback group. So you're probably talking about a 2nd-round pick. You're probably talking about maybe a 3rd-round pick, depending on, the center position, depending on wide receiver, tight end, whatever the case may be, pass rusher. There's a lot of question marks, obviously, surrounding this roster. So I think this is a cornerback room that you can definitely add to on day 2 of the draft. And I think you could look at maybe what the Lions did with their secondary group this year, where you're adding just a bunch of solid veterans, and then you drop in a 2nd-round pick, a top 50 selection, wherever that is. And I think you feel better about that room. Maybe Dean Leonard kind of takes a step forward. Maybe just your Taylor continues to take a step forward. Ising Bassey's played well over the last few weeks. So I think you add as many pieces as you can. You let them sort it out in training camp, and you drop in a top 50 pick and kind of go from there for the secondary as a whole.
Yep. All we need is the NFL to let a Brian Branch type player drop all the way to the 2nd round, and we're good to go.
Somebody that I would have been very happy if the Chargers had taken at 21. Not to say that Quentin isn't that guy. But Tyler, any of these other questions that we compiled stand out to you? We're running a little short on time, so maybe 1 or 2 more?
Sure. I can find one. Let's see. From Darren, and more of an X's and O's question. I'm curious because I don't keep track necessarily, and it's been harder to pay attention the last few weeks. Is it just me, or are there no design RB screenplays in Kell Moore's cookbook? Can't remember the last time the Chargers ran one for Eckler. Have those been missing? It's more of a asking you question if you happen to know. I guess we could have dialed up Arjun and phoned a friend here to see how many screens the Chargers have actually run. But even outside of RB screens, it feels like the Chargers have run fewer screens in general. It tends to be more like, we were frustrated that Quentin Johnston was not getting the 10 screens that they would run every week to start the season, to Mike Williams, to Josh Palmer, to Keenan Allen, to Gerald Everett. So I feel like overall that's gone away, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so according to Pro Football Focus, Austin Eckler has 31 targets behind the line of scrimmage. Obviously, not all of those are going to be screens, but that's a decent amount for him. Obviously, the checkdowns, things like that. I think that they're a part of the playbook. I would like to see more of them, especially with Easton Stick around. I would like to see more screens for Darius Davis. I do agree that that's a part of the playbook that I would like to see increased. I love when Kell Moore does run a screen. We've seen Darius Davis have huge plays off of the screens. We've seen Austin Eckler have big plays off of the screens. When they're there and when they're called, I think they're fantastic plays, and they're very well designed and executed for the most part. But I do agree. I think that needs to be a greater emphasis going forward.
Yes, for one game.
For one game, and then if Kellen's back next year, for next season.
Yep.
All right. Did you have another one there that you wanted to hit on?
Oh, I get to do another one? Okay, so who are some of your favorite, this is from Mackenzie, by the way, who are some of your favorite coordinator candidates? So, of course, it slightly depends on who the head coach is, but who are some of the names that keep popping up in your mind that we've discussed before, et cetera, to help round out this staff?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at coordinator names, I think my eye is kind of drawn towards, like quarterbacks coaches, as well as like defensive line coaches. We've talked a few, and I'll let you hit on some of the defensive line guys, but from a offensive standpoint, I'm super intrigued by Gerard Johnson, the quarterbacks coach in Houston. The Chargers interviewed him for the offensive coordinator position last year. And he's only added to his resume working with CJ Stroud in Houston, as well as getting a positive game out of positive 2-game stretch out of Case Keenum. So that's somebody that I'm super interested in as a potential offensive coordinator candidate. Obviously, Bobby Slowick is a potential head coaching candidate. That pairing would do very well for me. I think there are some other ones too, but I'll let you hit on some of the defensive guys that we've talked a bit about. Specifically the gentleman in Tennessee.
Oh, goodness, yes. That's my coordinator crush, is Terrell Williams from Tennessee, the assistant head coach slash defensive line coach for the Titans. Even got to be the head coach for a game in the preseason against, I believe, the Bears this past year. Excellent defensive line, ties to Khalil Mack from Los Angeles. Would love him there. As far as offense goes, Tanner Engstrom, the Lions pass game coordinator, I brought him up last year as a potential OC option. I think, again, like many others, he's only built his resume with another really good year. Chris Kosaric, of course, the 49ers defensive line coach. That's a pretty popular one. A lot of ties to the 49ers, including one Adam Peters. Cowboys secondary coach and pass game coordinator Joe Witt Jr. He'd be great. And then I think with so many ties to this guy and with so many potential first-year head coaches, I think Dolphins QB coach and pass game coordinator Darrell Bevell, with his experience, would be a good person to lean on. We've talked about these guys quite a bit. You're more than welcome to go back to our channel and watch our Big Four episode and other rankings and such. But yeah, those guys really stick out to me. But there's plenty of good options.
Yeah, I think also on the defensive side, Al Harris, the secondary coach in Dallas, is going to be a hot commodity. He's somebody who's done awesome work there from a secondary perspective. It sounds like some of these head coaches that were potential like DC OC options, or a lot of them are potentially keeping their jobs. So we'll see what happens there. Speaking of defensive line coaches, we brought him up on our show again. Tyler mentioned it. You can check him out. But Jacques Caesar, former Charger, is building a very positive coaching career down there in Houston right now. as the defensive line coach. Will Anderson is doing some great things down there as a pass rusher. I forget his first name, Collins, the defensive tackle. I think Malik Collins. So Jacques Cesaire has been kind of a budding defensive line coach. I love the idea of getting a defensive line coach as a coordinator because it just, adds that emphasis up front in the trenches. Terrell Williams would be a great option. Jacques Cesaire as well fits that mold. And I think it'd just be really cool is to get, a former Charger who's in coaching in the NFL. Would be cool to see him brought back to coach the Chargers in some capacity.
Yes, the Chargers fans are definitely clamoring for a former Chargers player to be a coordinator for the Chargers, but Cesaire for the defense will be just fine.
Yeah, 100%. All right. I think that'll do it for us today. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out?
Nope, man. Just Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all you guys. Continue to follow us, like, subscribe, comment, say good things, say bad things, whatever. Comments always help the channel grow. So we'll take anything you got.
Yeah, 100%. And sincerely, do appreciate all the great work from the Chargers and their production team. Eddie and Greg specifically have worked wonders with us all season long producing the show. We are super appreciative of their work, and Megan and everybody on the social team putting out our content. It's been a true treat to cover this season. Obviously, we wish there were more wins, but it's been a ton of fun working with the best production team in the league, and I sincerely mean that. So appreciate all you guys for listening. Appreciate you guys for supporting. Like Tyler said, check us out on our own channel as well. We do appreciate all the support over there. As always, we'll see you at this time next week. As always, Bolt up.